Thank you all for attending. I'd like to remind guests to please sign in at the table. I am calling this meeting of the Public Services Committee, Monday, April 9th, 2012, to order. With that, we will have a review and approval of minutes dated March 12th, 2012.
That seat is cursed. I would move approval. Urbanbach.
Brown seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that passes 4-0. All right, the first thing on our agenda is a special events ordinance, and we will be getting an update by Kelby Moraes. And Kelby.
Good evening, City Council. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation. Here to discuss an update to special event ordinance, or actually putting special events into ordinance. This is a process that we have been working on for about 14 months. As the City of Sioux Falls continues to grow, the number of events that are hosted in Sioux Falls continues to grow. Not only in the number of events, but also in their scope. So there was a group of us that were tasked with putting together some ordinance language and some proposals. We did meet with some event organizers to go over our proposals, and the body of our work is here before you today. With me today is Galen Smith with the Police Department, Keith Allenstein with the City Attorney's Office, and Regan Smith with Sioux Falls Fire Rescue. Basically, special events in Sioux Falls, we've recently hosted over 100 events citywide. Event sizes are very small events, from small fundraising walks, of course, to large events such as Jazz Fest. The majority of these events, of course, happen between May and October, and then again, most of those happen on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This is important because this is a time at the time of week where resources are limited. Work week is basically ended, and now we're hosting large events that are impacting city facilities. City departments that assist in special events are the Police Department, Parks, Fire Rescue, Traffic, Street Department, Health, Building Services, Finance, Community Development, Risk Management, City Attorney's Office, and if event is downtown, of course, public parking is in that as well. So most city departments are involved when it comes to special events, whether they're hosted on city property or in public property such as the streets. So as we were going through this process, we decided that we would look at some other cities to see how they do handle special events, and we came up with some other cities that we compared ourselves with or looked at to see what they were doing. Lincoln, Nebraska, Sioux City, Omaha, Minneapolis. Columbus, Ohio has a good special event ordinance, and then Fargo. The first thing that we were after when we started looking at special events was some consistency. Events that happen in the park system are required to hold a liability insurance policy before they can have their event. That, however, was not carried over into city streets. For if we're hosting a road race or something that's solely on city streets and the Parks Department's not involved, we weren't always getting an insurance policy to cover the city. So the first thing that we're doing within this ordinance is creating some consistency and asking for that insurance policy to be carried over for all event organizers. Also, to add some consistency to it, we are defining and classifying special events that would happen on public property. So as we got into the ordinance, the considerations that were built into the ordinance were, one was to define the special event, outline the insurance requirements, define why some events would not necessarily be allowed to happen on public property, provide some timelines for event organizers to submit their application. As you get into the ordinance, there are classes of event sizes, and depending on the size of the event, any event with more than 2,500 people, we would ask that the application not be submitted to us less than 60 days prior to the event, and under 2,500 no more than or no less than 30 days prior to the event. Basically what that does is it gives city staff and the event organizer enough time to cover all of our bases. There's a lot of things that go into hosting a special event, so we're just making sure that the event can be successful, because at the end of the day, that's what we're after is successful events, not only for the city but for those organizers and the agency that they represent. Also, a consideration we built into ordinance were some reasons why an event may be shut down. That typically doesn't happen, but we wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves that kind of authority, so to speak, that if something did get out of hand, that we could then shut down the event and restore order. One of the big things that's really new would be that the ordinance provides a fee structure, an application fee for the events. One of the final things that we built into the ordinance was that it would allow the city to charge event organizers for equipment that was necessary for their event that they did not provide. Examples would be barricades for traffic control or dumpsters for sanitation during their event. Just gives us an avenue to make sure that the event is still successful, but then allows us to recoup those costs. The fee schedule that we're proposing in this ordinance, you can see for Class 1 events, it's 10,000 people and up would be a $500 application fee. Class 2 events, 2,500 to 9,999, and parades would be $250. Class 3, 500 to 2,999 is $100, and then anything under that 500 would be a $25 application fee. This application fee would be, as written in the ordinance, would be something that would be collected at the time of application. And basically what we're trying to do here is as we build some consistency, we're trying to get the event organizers to have as much ownership in their event as we do. Like I said before, there's a lot of things that go into a special event. A special event application for Parks and Recreation is a 9-page application. While everything on the application doesn't necessarily apply to each event, it does give them something to think about depending on what they're planning on doing with their event. If they're going to sell something, if they're going to have fireworks, whether they need security, that kind of thing. Proposed implementation would be for events held on or after January 1st of 2013 would be then subject to this ordinance. And after we looked at the event calendar for 2011, using this fee structure, the revenue generated by this fee schedule and this ordinance would generate an estimated $10,000. So it's not an awful lot of money, but at the same time, it's something that will help us as we provide resources for these events. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Brown?
Thank you. Kelby, thank you for outlining this. Couple of questions. First of all, Jazz Fest is probably our largest one. How does that work today in terms of a special event? Do they pay a fee currently? And it seems like we do a lot in kind as a city, correct?
Right. The fees that they pay the city that I'm aware of is for Parks and Recreation. There's a $50 concession fee that is for every point of sale. So every one of their vendors that's selling something pays the city $50. We do require the insurance policy. The health department does have a fee for their vendors, but I believe the vendors pay that fee for health licensing for the food vendors, application for the sound permit, and pyrotechnics permit for the fireworks. Outside of that, I don't believe we collect any fees.
So I wonder what you're proposing, would that $500 cover all those odd fees we have today, or would the $500 be in addition to those existing?
The $500 would be in addition to the fees that are currently being paid by event organizers.
Okay. And then on the liability insurance, we've been talking about that on a daycare issue. Do you know for an event what that would cost generally?
It really depends. From what I've heard from different event organizers, it depends on what they have at the event. It can range anywhere from a $250 policy. I've heard of $800 policies. I would venture to guess that the Jazz Fest policy is considerably more than that.
And currently, do some of those organizations already have that kind of a policy, do you know?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And then do we have a point person for events? Is that you?
Pretty much. Either myself or Alicia Luther with Parks and Recreation, or Galen Schmidt with the police department, or who's doing events for the police department. So basically, if it's in the park, it's with Parks and Rec. If it's not, police department's the contact.
Okay. You've indicated that the demand has increased. My concern is that in my time even on the city council, we've not added park employees. We've actually cut park employees, but yet the demands are more. Do you foresee where we need someone focusing more on events because we want to encourage these to bring visitors to town?
Right. The special event process does take an awful lot of time. This year, the way Parks and Recreation has run it in the past is that either myself or Alicia would be the point person for that year. We've gotten to the point where not necessarily the best way to do it, we feel, because and then we would switch off year after year. So at the end of the year, everybody would be calling me when they need to talk to Alicia, and it just got confusing, and our customer service we didn't feel like was the best. So what we've done this year is we've divided the events, so that from now on, these events are mine, these events are Alicia's, and a lot of times, especially with new events, they do take a lot of hand-holding. Mm-hmm. So it can eat up a bit of a day. Today, for example, I spent some time playing phone tag with an event organizer, just trying to answer a simple question. So I don't know if I answered your question very well.
I think you did. Thanks.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, I guess I have one. You stated at on the applications that the cost of the whatever class would be submitted at the time of the application, and
Correct.
here it states that the application fee is non-refundable.
Right.
So what if the event doesn't get approved? You're just going to keep that money, or?
Well, at the
should
time
it
of
be-
application, it would be pretty clear at the time of application whether or not the event would go. And at that point, we just wouldn't accept the application or the fee. If we do get into the event, though, or get into working with this event organizer, and we get a ways down the way, and it's not going to work for whatever reason, that event is still non-refundable. We've held up our end of the deal and worked with them to get them to the point of issuing the permit, but it just doesn't go. So we still have all of those resources invested in the event, whether it goes or not.
Okay, thank you. Councilperson Aguilar?
I see that revenue generated by the fee schedule is estimated to be about $10,000. Are we eating those costs that this will go towards right now? Or will this how will this revenue be used?
It would be a bit of a cost recovery, although it's not going to recover all of our costs in the issuing of the permit. And it's not a use fee. It's not trying to cover whether there's police presence in an event, whether there's park presence in an event. It's not trying to cover those costs. It's more a first step in getting the event organizer some more ownership, but we're not recovering costs. So yeah, I guess at this point we're just simply eating the cost. It's part of our day.
So would the fee where would the fee go? Would it be under the parks budget? Would it be evenly distributed among all of the other entities that are involved?
Well, the conversations we've had at this point, it's almost a 50-50 split as far as the point person for the events. So the way I envision it is that half of the revenue would come to Parks and Recreation, the other half would go to the police department, as they're the point person on the other events.
Thank you.
Councilperson Urfenbach?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Kelby. This is, I've had a little bit of experience based on the park board with all of the things that you guys go through in getting ready for these events. One of the conversations that we've had among council members and with Director Kearney is about small nonprofits and their participation in various events. And I understand that the costs involved with running an event, of hosting an event, as the city is sort of the host, the costs are really astronomical. Your little $10,000 line item is nothing, and we all know that. Talk to me about, and I know there's no normal event, every event is different, but can you give me an average event? What are the kinds of things that city staff are involved with, not only in planning, but the day of the event? Can you just give us kind of a laundry list, or what are the things that we're looking at?
Day of event, it does kind of depend on the event. If it's a road race type thing, something that happens on city streets, there's a much larger police presence. So police officers at intersections, along with volunteers. Events in the park system, of course, the big thing is trash and recycling. That's a big piece of the event for us. Prior to that, there's an event committee that meets. All those city departments that I mentioned, we sit down with each event organizer, go through their event, make sure they get the permits they need, get their questions answered, they answer questions that we may have. So day of, it's traffic control and trash and recycling are the big things. And events that do a lot of food, of course, then the health department has health inspectors on site to issue the food licenses.
And if I might, just a comment, Mr. Chair. I just appreciate staff coming together with this plan. I've watched some of those event planning things going on from a little bit behind the scenes, and then of course we've all been to events where we see city staff going a little crazy, doing all this stuff, doing the garbage running back and forth, all the things that go on. I think this is a really great plan. I'm excited to see it move forward to council. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want a motion to move it to council, or are we at that point, or we want more discussion? Thank you, Kelby.
I have one more question.
Councilman Brown?
Just diving a little bit deeper, in those years where you've been in charge of all the events in that May to October timeframe when 80% of them happen, how much time in your job do you estimate you're spending on those events, if by percentage-wise?
Just during those months, I would easily spend more than 30% of my week working with special events.
Very good. Thanks, Kelby.
I guess there's one thing I would like to add to this too, is he's just talking about park events, where we have an event committee that actually looks at the events for downtown and anywhere else within the city outside of the Parks Department. Do we have someone here that could speak to those events?
Well, actually, this
Or is this
ordinance
gonna cover
would
everything?
cover any event that happens on public property, whether it's in a street or city park. It's bringing all that into one and trying to get us some consistency that it's all one. And then it would, the way we envision this actually happening in practice would be that the downtown events, then instead of having a separate committee for them, we would have one event committee for all events that happen in a public space.
So then,
I was just going to add to that, just based on my own experience with some conversations with folks who are involved in events, and Kelby, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that it sits now, I might be a vendor for a particular event and I pay a certain amount if the event is in the park, but if that event is on the street, I pay less or maybe nothing at all, and so the consistency is not there under current ordinance, if I'm interpreting that correctly.
Right, that's correct, and there are some vendors that are allowed on city streets that are not allowed in parks too.
okay, so give me a quick synopsis of the process. Once you put in an application, when will the event committee take a look at this and approve it? things like that, I guess, because I'm still trying to get this non-refundable thing here, because I want to make sure that it's non-refundable after we start the process, not before the event committee actually gets to look at the event.
Right. In practice, the way things work now, when the event application is submitted, the very first thing is to make sure that the space that they want to have the event is available. That would be the first hurdle. After that, it's a quick read through their application to make sure that there's nothing in their application that throws up big red flags. There have been one application in my time doing special events that we did not allow the event to happen. There have been other times where we start the process, the application has been received, we go ahead and book the space, we work all the way up to the meeting, and then they don't have the event. So the situation in which we're talking about, I don't think really happens much. And the one event that we did not allow happen, if it would happen under this ordinance, we would have known right away that it's not going to happen. So we really do work hard on behalf of the event organizers to make sure that they do have their event, and it happens when they want it to happen, in the space that they want it to happen, and that it is successful.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Statements? I'd like to make one. I've been waiting for about 3 years for this to happen. So I also want to thank Councilman Edelman for working with the Parks Department on this too. I think this is a great jump forward in making sure that our events throughout the city are uniform and that everybody's on the same playing field. So thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Thank you.
I would like a motion from the committee, how we should move with this.
I'll move to send it to the full city council.
Second, Erpenbach, and then question.
Okay. With that,
Question, Mr. Chair. Should we, I'm kind of asking the committee, should we send it to an informational meeting prior to that first reading so that we kind of air this again with the entire council?
I think going to an informational would be the best thing so that it's produced once again so citizens actually have a good time to digest the changes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Do you want to amend that motion then, or are we just okay with sending it to the
No, I think we're
informational?
okay. We just know that that's part of the assumption.
Okay. With that, do we have any public input on this? Anyone? Okay, thank you. With that, a vote from the committee. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Aye.
All against? Okay, that passes 4-0. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Sustainability Master Plan. On this, we will be concentrating more on the hauler ordinance, and Bob Capel will be giving the presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Capel with the Public Works Environmental Division. I have with me today Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works, Amy Ladonsky, our Sustainability Coordinator, and Joe Heffron, our Sustainability Technician. As you are aware, about a month ago, our team provided a presentation to the full City Council on our draft Sustainability Master Plan. Since that time, we've had a public open house. We've also had a meeting with our Solid Waste Planning Board. Since that time, we've received some significant public comments on the Sustainability Master Plan, and we also have been requested by Councilor Kenny Anderson Jr. to come to this committee to discuss the Sustainability Master Plan, specifically focusing on waste minimization. And it is our pleasure to be here today. We thank you for your time and your consideration of this matter. First, I'm going to give a short presentation on the Sustainability Master Plan, focusing on the waste minimization plan. First of all, as we all know, and when there's any good plan developed, it provides a lot of options and recommendations that we can pursue as a community to improve the area that we're trying to improve. I'd like to give a little background first to talk about where we're at in relationship, what's been done in the past. In 2005, the City Council adopted the first recycling goal. That goal was 8% on our licensed garbage haulers. For about 5-6 years, our team had some difficulties in implementing the recycling goal, enforcing the recycling goal, and trying to reach the goals that we have established as a community. So we worked with the Solid Waste Planning Board, and we brought, the Solid Waste Planning Board developed and recommended revisions to Chapter 18, which we brought to the Council last year, 2011, and the City Council unanimously approved those ordinance revisions. Some of the key components that we did last year that we accomplished together was we established an enforceable recycling standard. Instead of requiring all garbage haulers to comply with the recycling goal, we actually reduced the standard. We said if we're going to have an enforceable standard, we're going to reduce it to only 80% of the goal. So that was an accomplishment we made last year. We also established an enforcement strategy for recycling non-compliance issues, specifically if a garbage hauler is unable to reach that enforcement recycling standard. We also established recycling rebate and surcharges to basically incentivize and disincentivize garbage haulers that were doing an excellent job and those haulers were doing a poor job in recycling. In 2012, approximately 3 weeks ago, we were able to successfully give our first recycling rebates to the top performers in the city of Sioux Falls. We are in the process now of finalizing our sustainability master plan, and we'd like to kind of talk a little bit further about the recycling rates. Next slide here, this bar graph, we've discussed this in the past. This kind of signifies the performance of our licensed garbage haulers. In 2011, we had 30 garbage haulers, and these are the recycling rates. And as you can see, there's a significant variability between the bottom and the top. We had rates that ranged from 7% to 29%. And also, as you can indicate on this graph, you see there's 5 top performers on the top of the graph. Those are the garbage haulers that not only met the recycling goal, but they exceeded the recycling goal by over 50%. And those were the garbage haulers that we just recently provided a rebate to those companies for their excellent work and their customers' work in recycling. We also this year, by ordinance, are required to basically revise our recycling goal. And our recycling goal is just not an arbitrary number. It is not a number that the city has chosen. What we do is we take a backward look, and we look at 2011, and we find out what the actual recycling rate was for the entire region and community. And that recycling rate was 20%. So then what we do is we established a new recycling goal for 2012, which now there is that expectation and hope that all garbage haulers will implement measures to try and reach that recycling goal. I'm going to now move into the Sustainability Master Plan as requested. If you all recall in the Sustainability Master Plan, we had an internal stakeholder group and an external stakeholder group that assisted the city staff and our consultant in developing a Sustainability Master Plan. We had representatives from 10 divisions and departments that represented the internal steering implementation team, and we had 22 members of the public that were outside of the city staff that represented our external stakeholders on the coastal sustainability team. We feel that it was a very good cross-section of our community that was a very valuable resource to assist us as a sounding board to develop a sustainability master plan that is appropriate for our community and region. A little bit about Sustainability Master Plan. If any of you had a chance to review it, it is out on the website. Again, as we talked about, it is, as any good plan, it has a lot of options, it has a lot of recommendations, and it tries to give us it ends up being a resource tool for our staff to basically improve sustainability within our community. One of the areas we're going to focus on today is waste minimization. It's so important also want to share that that plan also has a section of the document that has some appendices that are a very significant part of the plan. It deals with the greenhouse gas inventory, there's a business case analysis, and also there's a solid waste and recycling assessment report. These documents, especially the solid waste recycling assessment, was developed by the consultant that we hired. We basically requested a consultant to come into the city to take a look at our practices, to benchmark us against other communities across the nation and tell us where we're doing good, where we're doing not that well, and then to make recommendations to the city how we can improve our efforts in waste minimization. It is important to share with you at this time, so there's no confusion, this Sustainability Master Plan is not intended to be a formal policy document, but rather just a tool or a roadmap to assist city staff and the public as sustainability efforts are pursued. Therefore, this Sustainability Master Plan will not be presented to the City Council for adoption. And we do not have the intent and did not have the intent that this document would become a formal implementable document that's adopted through resolution. Any strategy that comes out of the Sustainability Master Plan will, of course, be brought back to this council for your consideration at that time. The Sustainability Master Plan, we developed a mission statement, and I'm just going to read it here. We had a lot of input on this. It was, working together, we will promote a vibrant community through the innovative and wise use of our resources. Again, this mission statement is a guide to assist us as we move forward in the plan. The next slide, I'm going to talk to you about the front part of the Sustainability Master Plan really focuses on 6 areas that we worked on. There was waste minimization, water resources, energy, transportation, the built and natural environment, and community vitality. And as we discussed this afternoon, we're going to focus on the waste minimization section of that plan. I'd also like to clarify to the council and to the public that as we talked about, there's kind of 2 sections of that plan. The one section was developed by the internal and external stakeholders. The second part of the plan was a document that was provided by our national consultant that gave us direct feedback after they benchmarked us against other communities. So it's important to recognize that there's 2 different areas in the plan so there's not confused. We wanted to provide that distinction to you at this time. The first part of the plan that was developed by the internal and external stakeholders dealing with waste minimization, we came up with several goals that we think are important for the city to continue our efforts to improve waste minimization and recycling in our region. As an example, one of the goals was basically to establish a minimum participation rate. You know, how many citizens actually in our region actually recycle? We're trying to set a goal. Let's get a minimum percentage up there. Another goal was basically to increase the city's haulers recycling goal. As we talked about, we've established a goal, and how can we increase that goal as we move forward? The second part of the plan, which I think we're probably going to focus on, obviously is probably the most important thing, and probably the most fear has been developed with this plan considering it, is the actual consultant's recommendations on the waste minimization recommendations. I'm going to just read through these. These are the 8 recommendations that gave us. They asked us that the city should consider establishing collection zones or districts for licensed haulers, that we should limit the total number of haulers, that we should mandate curbside collection versus house-side collection, that we should standardize collection method and recyclable materials collected, increase the hauler license fees, transition from an open subscription system to an organized collection system, require a private businesses to report recycling tonnages, and last of all, apply for state funding for waste diversion and recycling projects. And just to let you know, our team continues to apply for grants and funding to assist us on this matter, so that is not a recommendation that we are not already achieving. It is important that I want to share with the council this time and the public that it is not our intentions, and it was my direction to our team, that we will not rely on a national consultant to tell us what we are going to do locally. Our team has met together and we have gone through a review of this process, and we're going to come today to you to let you know where we're going to focus our efforts on and where we think we're going to get the best benefit to this plan and that we feel is reasonable for our community locally. As I stated, the Public Works staff has reviewed the consultant recommendations with the city administration. The city team and administration has prioritized these recommendations. And now the cities, as I stated, we need to take ownership and decide what we are going to pursue locally. Our Public Works team will be sharing the consulting recommendations we will pursue, and I want to let you know that we are going to have a singular focus today. And if I can achieve one thing today, is to settle any fears, settle any confusion. We are going to approach the council and the public and our solid waste planning board and let you know what we believe as a team is the singular issue that we want to focus on. And of course, as we stated, any proposed modifications based on this, any policies or ordinance changes will be brought back to the council for your consideration. And so at this time, I would like to share with you what our team has been working on over the past several weeks since the plan has been brought out. And we have decided that is in the best interest and we think is the best fit for our local community to basically pursue the one recommendation from the consultant. And that recommendation is to standardize the collection method and recycling materials collected. Currently, as you are probably aware, we have a very wide variety of systems out there right now. We have haulers that have source separation of recycled materials. We have haulers that have dual stream recycled materials collected, and then we have haulers that do single stream collection. And we also have haulers that are collecting different materials for recyclables. And what this does is it creates a very difficult problem for the city to do public education. What we have to do is basically totally rely on the haulers to perform the majority of that public education, because we have to sit and tell the public that please contact your hauler and find out how they want you to recycle, the method, and what recyclable materials they want you to recycle. So we believe that this recommendation, and only this recommendation, will be pursued by our team. We will be reaching out to the Solid Waste Planning Board and working with them as a team. We will be reaching out to the solid waste and recycling industry and working with them to basically try and find the best way of pursuing this recommendation to improve our waste minimization and recycling efforts. Where we're at, where we're planning to go, just a time schedule. We are planning next week to have a meeting with the solid waste and recycling industry to clearly relay to them our purpose and what goal we're going to be achieving, what recommendation we're going to be pursuing. We are, by the end of April, going to be meeting with the Solid Waste Planning Board Ordinance Subcommittee. At that time, we start doing the groundwork, working with that committee, getting public input, and trying to find out, is there a need for policy changes? Is there a need for ordinance changes to implement this recommendation? And then we hope by the end of May, we will be back to the Solid Waste Planning Board and developing recommendations to come back to the council on how we can implement this recommendation if it is decided the best option for the city. And ultimately, as we all know, any policy change and ordinance changes will be approved by City Council. So I'd like to open up for any questions at this time.
Questions from the committee? Councilwoman Orfenbach?
Thanks, Bob. I think it's important to say it again that the Sustainability Master Plan really is just a framework, a tool. I liked how you said it. It's a tool for us to have conversation around this. I think that's really important that some of us have maybe jumped ahead in the conversation, and I don't want people to be in fear of any of this. My question, though, is that if your team, and obviously this is also up for debate, but if your team has chosen only that one item to standardize the collection method and recyclable materials collected, is that it? Are we going to do only that, or are we going to keep that list out there and work toward other things as time goes on? Can you talk about how that process might work for us?
At this time, that is the only recommendation and the only pursuit that our team is going to pursue. Obviously, we are always open for public comment. As you know, we probably have comments that are thinking that may be too aggressive, and we're going to receive comments that that's not aggressive enough to basically improve waste minimization. And we will balance those public comments and make a decision if this is adequate. We truly believe as a team, because of the wisdom and foresight of the council last year of making the modifications that we did to our recycling ordinances, if we can accomplish this additional task of basically standardizing the collection method in recyclable materials, I believe we will reach a point where most everybody in our community is satisfied with our efforts. And we have not gone overboard and been too aggressive getting there. And if we did not feel that, we would not have come to the council or come to the Solid Waste Planning Board with that not in mind. We truly believe this will bring us to where most people are satisfied with the outcomes.
Are we talking about making everybody go single stream?
We are right now developing the methodologies, and we are doing the evaluation to come to the solid waste planning board. We truly believe there's a fairly clear and objectionable decision that needs to be made. Single stream is appears to us, is the most successful and easiest for the public to recycle in our community. But again, we will be setting up that discussion. We will be putting together our justifications on what methodology we will pursue to the solid waste planning board and get their input at that time. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Statements? I have a couple. Thank you for the presentation. You and I have had a discussion on this before, last week actually, and a lot of the things I was looking for has happened. One of the things, though, on here that increasing the hauler license fees. I know you're saying you're not pursuing that, but I guess what I was looking at after speaking to a number of haulers is not so much the yearly fees, but right now, what are the fees and requirements to start a garbage business in our city?
the only one I can speak to is our public works fees, and that is the licensing fee that we charge them. I would not be able to speak to the other fees that they have to basically provide to the city or provide their industry to basically start a business. So.
Okay. Would Mr. Cotter have that information, or is that something we're going to have to get a little bit later?
Thank you, Council Chair. Just like Bob had said, we only manage the public works side of that license, and so there's other licenses that come when you start a business in the state of South Dakota and the city that, at least tonight, I'm not prepared to talk to those. We could do some research for you and bring that back as a part of that work group. But again, like Bob had mentioned, on the licensing, we want to, our recommendation is to keep this very focused on our recommendation, move forward, and provide that work product for this one recommendation. Okay.
Okay. I would like some research done on that, as what it requires someone to open up a garbage company in Sioux Falls. If we could get an email on that, that would be appreciated. Okay, thank you. Next, I have another question on, it happens to be another license question. During one of the forums that I was attending, a hauler that does business in Del Rapids said that he also has a Sioux Falls license but doesn't do business here. Do we require anyone that uses our landfill to have a Sioux Falls hauler's license?
Yes, correct. Anybody who basically collects or transports or disposes solid waste to our landfill has to be licensed with the city of Sioux Falls.
Okay. Question from Councilman Brown.
Bob, I don't know if you have the answer to this either, but do you know what we paid for the Sustainable Master Plan?
Roughly, I think it was about a $200,000 expenditure, and if you recall, that that expense was covered through an EECBG grant.
What kind of grant?
An EECBG grant, an Energy Efficiency Community Conservation Block Grant. Sorry about that.
Community Development Block Grant, essentially?
Yeah, exactly. The city paid some nominal expenditures above what the grant was, but the grant covered the majority of it.
This isn't a question, it's more of a statement, but it seems like we've spent a lot of money to take one recommendation that really doesn't go very far.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate your comment and appreciate your concern. Again, the Sustainability Master Plan, that was one recommendation that we're pursuing out of waste minimization. And remember, there are 6 focus areas. And if you would take a look at that document, I mean, the greenhouse gas inventory alone was a significant part of that expense. And that portion of the plan is going to be very valuable to us as a city government and the community when we start trying to improve energy efficiency in our region and our community.
Any other questions from the committee? Statements? Councilwoman Urfenbach?
Remind me again then, Bob, I know we talked about this when we looked at the full plan. There's going to be like almost like a dashboard on the website so that we can kind of keep track of how all those other pieces are coming together. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that is correct. That has not been developed yet. We are, the Sustainability Master Plan will be completed by the end of May, and at that time we will have a website set up which will list out those goals, those strategies and tactics for those full 6 focus areas, and it'll basically be a tracking mechanism so the council or the public can sit and track and see how we are doing on trying to reach some of those goals. You are correct.
Any other questions? Okay. I have another one here. Sorry. So right now, we're looking at the standardized collection methods, number 4 on our list, and that's what we're going to go after.
Yes.
And you're looking at bringing that back to the council at the end of May?
Yeah, as we know, it's dependent. We give the time that is necessary to do the job. As an example, last year when we came to you with those ordinance revisions, that took us 2 to 3 years to get to that point. We do hope with focusing on this area, we are hopeful that we will be coming to council in summer sometime with some proposed policy changes and ordinance changes to implement that recommendation.
With that, committee, I'm going to ask that we hold this, since it's nothing that the council's going to be voting on, that we hold this until they actually come up with some solid recommendations so we can review them and then pass them to the council. Do we have any?
You're saying about the ordinances that they plan to bring forward?
Yes.
What he was talking about with item 4?
If they come out of this sustainability draft, I'd like to see them come to our committee first, and then we can move them forward.
I see no problem with that.
We'd be pleased to do that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or statements yet? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
I am going to allow some citizen testimony here for, we only have, I'm going to say about 15 minutes here, folks. I apologize for us running late, but I will allow some public testimony. So if we can keep it to our 5 minutes, I would take any public testimony from anyone who would like to speak up on this issue. If you could give us your name, please.
I'm Mary Glenski, 632 West 9th Street. I have a question and a comment. He mentioned 6 goals. I looked through this little chart. I don't find any list of 6 things. I find 8. I find 5. It'd be nice to know what 6 goals he's talking about. And then the other question has to do with the concern about the condition of our city streets and the weight of garbage trucks on streets and alleys. And I did get from the city a list of the current regulations relative to maximum weight permitted on residential streets, maximum weight permitted on the streets that are built to handle heavier traffic and so on. But I wasn't able to get, although I had asked for it, I assume they didn't have time because I asked about 3-4 days ago. Do we have a list, for example, of garbage trucks who have checked in to the landfill? They get weighed when they checked in, they get weighed when they checked out. Do we have a list of people who have exceeded what would have been our requirements for residential streets? Because it's my opinion, and I think I'm probably right, that those garbage trucks have been on residential streets as well as the county roads and the other streets that are built to handle heavier traffic. So it might be an interesting procedure to check and see if there are garbage trucks that are overloaded when they come to the landfill. Because if they're overloaded there, they're not doing our streets any good. And we have streets and alleys that we'd prefer to keep in better shape than that. And I know some streets are built for heavier traffic than others, but my feeling is that something like a garbage truck, unless it's only going to industrial areas, is going to be on city streets somewhere and city alleys.
Thanks, Mary. I appreciate you coming up. You and I have talked about the weight of garbage trucks a couple of times, and it's been back on, kind of on my front burner again because you're not the only one talking to me about that. It is one of those things, Councilor Anderson, and I know part of your district deals with these kinds of issues as well. It's one of those things that we need to kind of be on top of, and we do have a mechanism for making, I'll call it a sting. We can actually sting these garbage haulers, and so I think that we'll be moving that forward just in terms of, you know what, we just need to be good citizens, good neighbors, and I appreciate you bringing that up again because you're not alone with that.
Thank you.
And also, Mary, I can tell you, I was told that for residential, it's supposed to be, the trucks are supposed to be 4-ton, and that we may have 6-ton trucks out there doing residential. So we definitely will follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public testimony? Please come on up.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Julia Zwanners, and I live at 6309 West Jordan Drive in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, out in North T, as we call it. The reason I'm here is a month ago I read the article about the considering curbside pickup. I got no problem for it when it's full, but when it's empty, South Dakota has 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, and your empty thing will blow over and it could be damaged. I'm willing to work with a garbage hauler. I talked with Kenny Anderson about this. Do that because I think it would benefit the hauler, benefit the city, benefit us because they would just pick it up. But we'd have to have some kind of a stake or some kind of insurance. That can be all figured out, and we can do that. But we have to remember we got 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. It's not California. It was 72 degrees and sunny, and the wind hardly blows. The other thing I was really upset about when I saw the article about the $200,000 report, and the fact that my garbage hauler wasn't listed. And I couldn't believe it, because when it's we use the Novak, and when they started recycling, our garbage, the regular garbage, dropped 50%. All the rest of it is going to recycling. How can my hauler not be on that list? And so I called them, and they were feeling just the way I was feeling. My gut just told me, hey, this is wrong. You may have spent $200,000, you just wasted a lot of time and money. Because if you check with the neighbors, you check with the haulers, I think the residential people got ripped off in that article. And that's what my hauler said. And he said, really, their job is for residential is about 39% recycling. Well, maybe you've already reached your goal and don't even know it. Because the rest of the difference for Novak, from what I understand, is because of Walmart recycles through another company. And the people, the first five are not normal residential haulers. Only solid waste or waste management was a thing. So I think they need to really look at this. Our haulers are bending over backwards. They're doing a good job and have for the city. We need to recognize it. If we need to recycle more, maybe the problem is someplace else. But this is why I'm here, is defend my hauler and all the other haulers that are doing a good job for the city of Sioux Falls, and not for the council to fall victim to this thing. I just looked at it as big business has come to Sioux Falls. We're going to consolidate, we're going to push it, and pretty soon we'll have that $1 million garbage truck, like the $1 million taxi cab, with high fees and stuff charged to the citizens and to the haulers. And it won't be any place for individual business. And Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and South Dakota in general is for right to work states. And when a man needs a job, he can pretty well get a job hauling garbage. And it's a good living. And we'd like to keep it that way. You know, as for the high traffic in the road, we all know what causes the roads to break up. Look at it this winter. We don't have hardly any potholes. It's the weather, not the trucks.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, and I know that you'll make the right decisions, and we just like to have this fairness, and don't try to be California when we're here in South Dakota.
Thank you very much. Any other public testimony? Council? Once again, I want to thank you all for attending this meeting. This is the start of the conversation. If anyone has any questions after this, any one of us are available. You can look up our information on siouxfalls.org or give us a call. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay.